The other day, a friend of mine sent me a photograph, this photograph of a drawer pull that he wanted to know how to draw. And so I thought this might be a good thing to do for the blog. So I've imported the photograph as an image, and it's quite large. I don't really care what the exact size is. There's no need to worry about exact dimensions at this stage. So I just made it quite large because I'm going to make a lot of geometry and I don't want to deal with a small face issue. The first thing I need to do is line this thing up because the photograph wasn't made so that this thing was perfectly centered. As you can see here, maybe you can see, I've put a guideline through the center of this post and it doesn't come quite close enough to the center of that post. So I'm going to set in a guideline, a vertical guideline there on that center, and that gives me a point of rotation. And you can see I've got the image selected with the blue bounding box. Now I'm going to get the rotate tool, and I'm going to click on that center point, and then I'm going to zoom in over here. And I'm going to try to get the tool to be as close to on center as I can. This post doesn't have a real perfect centering point, but we'll just go as close as we can. We don't have any intention of making this thing out of from the SketchUp model. It's just to show. So I can just rotate this down until it snaps onto the guideline. And now you can see that it lines up pretty well. Good enough. Now I'm only going to draw half of the bail, and then I'll make the rest of it from that one half. And I think I'll take this right side. That's just kind of doesn't really matter a whole lot which way you go. This first guideline that I put in is close enough to being on the center line of the end of the bail here, so we'll use that as our center line. We need something down here, need another guideline down here somewhere, and about the best you can do is eyeball where that's going to be, where it needs to be. And I'm going to kind of eyeball for the center of the pull. I'm just kind of looking to see where this curve kind of gets the lowest. We'll call that good enough. And so now I've kind of outlined that sort of the limits of the pull. And so now I need to draw some lines. And what I'm going to do first is I'm going to draw a curve. I'm just going to kind of eyeball a center line curve here for this. So the first section of it is straight up to, say, about in here. And the upper part is straight from there to, let's say, about there. And then we'll use the arc tool and put in a line for the bend, something like that. Hopefully you can see the line over the photograph. And actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to reduce the number of segments in this arc because we don't need 12 of them here. In fact, I think what I'll do is go to 4. That's enough. It looks like a rough curve here, but when we get all done with this thing, the pull is going to be pretty small, and so it won't really matter. Now I'm going to use the Bezier Curves tool to put in this curve. I should have made that a 2nd degree curve, I think. We'll play with it a little bit and see what we get. And nope, I think we're going to want it to be a 3 degree curve, and so I'm going to just put in Actually, that's not too bad right there, but I want to get a little bit. Actually, it was dropping below here. We just kind of play with this thing, and I don't even have to get it in perfectly to start with, because I can edit that curve and move the points as needed. I want to kind of straighten that bit of the curve out, so I'm going to bring this along farther down the guideline here, and then I'll bring this point up here back in. And let's see what we get. Okay, that's too far. Actually, we'll just leave it at that. So that's close enough. And now I'm going to triple click on that curve to select the whole thing and use the weld plugin. And I just have a keyboard shortcut, so I've now welded that so it behaves as a single curve. By the way, when I put the image in, I put it in so it was laying on the red-green axis here, or on the red-green plane. Okay, so let's move that curve up here. We're going to use that in a little bit. One thing I need to do, should have left the entity info box available, is I need to know how long that curve is, because I want to draw a straight line that length, and according to entity info it's about 84 11/16, and that's close enough for what I need to do here. So from here I'm going to draw 84 11/16. Okay, so there's a line that represents that center line straightened out. And for the moment, I'm going to get that down out of my way. I'm just going to move it down, I don't know, 24 inches is good for the moment. It's below our image and out of the way, but now we have that taken care of. All right, so our next step is to draw a straight version of our pull. So I'm going to come out here. Actually, I need to come out the same distance, and I need to measure off of this. What I'm going to do is use follow me here, and I want to know, okay, so the end of this thing is about, well, we can call it 2 3/4. That's good enough for the moment. So we're going to go in the green direction, 2 3/4, and that's half the end of our bail. Now we'll work on this end. So here we have an arc, and I'm going to draw the whole arc like that, but I'm going to end up cutting that about there. And actually, I know that my curve is drawn a little bit off center, and that's actually intentional. And the reason for that is that I want to create a tiny little flat right there, so that when because I'm drawing only half of this, and when I put the two halves together, I don't want there to be a ridge at that point. Alright, so we're going to get a little straight segment there, and maybe another arc in here. Alright, and then for this curve in here, this sort of S curve, I'm going to use the Bezier tools again. So Bezier curves, and I'm just going to come out here someplace, place that looks like a good place to start the straight bit, and then I'm going to make that curve. That's not too bad, except there's kind of a hard spot there. So let's see if we can edit the curve a little bit and soften that little spot out. That looks halfway decent. Let's bring that back down so that that line starts to flatten out there as well. And now I'm going to come out here and I'm going to taper that like so. Okay, so there's a profile of half of the pull. And now I'm going to orbit down low here so that I can put a circle on the end. The radius of this circle is unimportant. Just make it so that it's centered on the center line of the pull. I'm going to get rid of that face because if I run follow me with the face there, it'll remove the face on the end of this shape. And I'm going to do one more thing, and that is select all of these little segments here on the curved part, including that little short one. All right, and I'm going to weld those so that they behave as a single line. And the reason for that is that it will make a cleaner looking turning when I run follow me. So I'm going to select the circle and get the follow me tool, click on the face, and there we have our turned piece. Now we can get rid of that circle, and I'm going to make this a component. There we go. Now I'm going to I don't have to do this, but I'm going to just so everything is kind of lined up. I'm going to move this back up like this. So I'm going to use a plugin called Shape Bender. Actually, let's hide the photograph because we don't need that anymore. And we don't need the guidelines anymore, so we'll get rid of those. So I'm going to use a plugin called Shape Bender, which takes a component and a straight line and then a curved line and bends the component to match the curved line. So I have everything set up here. I've selected the component. I'll activate Curve Bender from the toolbar. And the cursor is telling me to select a straight line. The message down at the bottom indicates this also. It says select a single line that lies on the red axis. Actually, it's a line that lies parallel to the red axis. You do have to have this line oriented that way. And you'll see that if I, for example, hover over the curved line, it won't highlight. Neither does the component. But when I get over the straight line, the plugin detects that and highlights that line. And it shows me a start and an end point, which is fine. The cursor changes after I make that selection and shows a curved icon and tells you to select a curve to bend the shape to. So I'm going to select that, and we'll let it process a little bit. Because I've got a lot of segments here, it takes a few moments. And the plugin generates a sort of a mesh image. And before I zoomed in, it showed the start and the end, and they are matching our shape that we want to bend. You can also see the grid that for the straight line, and grid for the curve. Okay, and so if we want that, we'll just hit Enter to accept it. So I'm just going to hit enter and let the plugin run, and presto, we've got our bent version of the bail. Alright, so I'm going to unhide the image, and I'm going to stick the guideline back in here, coming up this way to my center, so I can draw the post. Let's see. Close enough. Didn't get it in exactly the right place to start. Probably still don't have it in exactly the right spot, but we're building a barn, not a church. Okay. So this is pretty straightforward. This little post is just going to be a circle. I have no idea how tall to make it at this point, and so I don't really care all that much. I do know that I want it to be at least as tall as this. We'll shorten that up once we get it down to the right size. Maybe we'll go up just a little bit more, and we can monkey with that later. Let's go ahead though and actually we'll that post has sort of a cone-shaped top, so I'm just drawing a triangle here, and then I'm just going to run follow me around that. And we'll take that and move that up. I'm not going to bother to make it a component at this point because, let's see, where are we going here? I'm going to copy these down and get them out of my way. I don't want to lose them yet, so I'm just going to move them down. Then I'm going to move this post back. And by the way, I moved them straight down because I still want this to be aligned underneath the bail. So I'm going to move that straight back, and I've started the move operation, and then I hit the shift key to lock that direction. So I can take the cursor and put it on the end of my line down here, and it's centered where the bail comes through the post. We're not going to bother with a hole in there because that's not all that useful or critical. Actually, now that that's in place, we could even maybe make that a little shorter. We'll just eyeball that a little bit. So I'll just make that a little bit longer like that. All right. And I'm going to copy the post and the half of the bail, and I'm going to copy those over with the move tool. I'm going straight down along the red axis, and then I'm going to flip these along the red direction, and then I'm going to bring that over to make the other half of the pull. And so if you look at that, if I hide that and get it out of our way for the moment, that's pretty close. It'll work for what we need to do. I'll unhide the straight thing again, although we don't really need it. And now what I'm going to do is turn on hidden geometry so I can see the center points of my posts. And I'm going to measure the distance between these using the tape measure tool. So I'm going to click on that point, and then I'm going to come over here to the other side and click on this one. And it tells me they're 109 and 31/32 apart. but I want this to be 3.5 inches. So I type 3.5, 3.5, and I'll hit enter. And then it asks me if I want to resize the model, and I'll say yes. It disappeared. So we'll use Zoom Extents to find it again. Now it's the right size, and I need to do a couple of things. I mostly wanted the copy on the left of the bail so I could get the positioning of the posts correct to get the distance. But I don't really need these anymore for the moment. I'll need them in a moment, but I don't want them right now. So this post, I'm going to go ahead and make that a component, and we'll call it post. I didn't make it a component before resizing it because the definition would have been written at that larger size, and then when I bring this into another model, it would have that same size rather than being this correct size, or what I'm calling the correct size. And then explode this component and remake it, and so it was written at the larger size. By exploding it and remaking it, I'm going to have this at the right size. So I'll just call this bail half. Doesn't really matter what you call it, just as long as you call it something. And now I can actually, before I even make the other copy, since I've got a nice place to do this, I'm going to rotate that. Just mark the center. We need a blue axis so that I can rotate this up into, I could have actually rotated this on any point, but I wanted to rotate it here. We'll make it vertical. And now we'll flip those copies. And we'll bring that in like so. Let's hide all our hidden geometry. And now I'm going to hide our seam line. So I've got, actually we'll do it a little easier way. You select that line by dragging a left to right selection box, and then we'll go to Edit, Hide, and you see now it looks like a single part. And I'm going to go ahead now and make this a component, a nested component, and I'll call it BailPull. Probably has a more proper name, but that's what I'll call it. And to finish up here, I'm going to make this so it's a usable component, or easily usable. So what I need to do is I need to, there we go. I wanted to just find that center point for a guideline. Now I'll right click on the component and choose Change Axes. I'm going to put the origin for the component axis on the intersection of those two guidelines. And I'll drag out along this horizontal guideline and back in the green direction, and I want to just see the green dotted line so it tells me that I'm parallel to the global green axis. There we go. So now there's our pull. We don't need guidelines anymore. We really don't need any of this stuff. Just pull that in. Put it up here close to the front. And just as a quick demonstration, suppose this is our drawer front, and I'm not measuring anything here really. Let's put a couple of crossing guidelines right there. If I go into my component library, which is hiding off to the side, and I select from the in-model library this DrawingABailPull, all right. There we go. We put in the pull right on the intersection of those guidelines, and it's centered there. So I've showed that in another blog post, but it can't get a whole lot easier than that to drop those pulls in. And there we have it.